effectively, but your job to design those stages and levels is obviously, again, very different from a city or a racetrack. It'd be piecing together the puzzle, it'd be creating, I mean, obviously that's kind of a rudimentary image, but potentially if you're building a puzzle sequence in a game, it's really, really tricky to put yourself in the mind of a puzzle designer where you're trying to make something, again, that the player can discover, kind of be challenging but not obtuse. I'm sure you've all played games where you've gone into it and what was the designer thinking? Like how, the solution is something that only is in their head. It's like some scrap of paper on the floor, under a carpet. And you're like, how was I meant to know that? And they're like, 7 hours ago, we told you. So again, there's things that you kind of have to step back and analyze. And then obviously, again, platformers, right? You think of Mario. I've used the original Mario 1.1 world. But again, hopefully you can kind of see that, again, depending on this type of game you're making, and I've put an aerial combat level in here because they're much larger open spaces. So with a platformer, it's very intentional because you're putting platforms and you're deciding jump heights and enemy distances. For a puzzle, again, you're trying to just think about the moment to moment, like how people are going to think through this. Am I giving them enough clues? Am I making it interesting to solve? If it's just to kind of go here, collect something, go there, put in a door, is that enough to make it engaging? Racetrack, same thing. With something like an aerial combat level, you really have to take a step back and be like, well, what is the intended experience, right? Well, the intended experience is dogfighting. Does adding tons and tons of geometry and stuff for you to smash into, is that fun? And then while you play it, a lot of the times, a lot of these kind of levels, they're actually big, just open skyboxes with mountainous terrain and whatever else. But the sky and the gameplay is the level design, if that makes sense. And you really need to know, it's very easy just to add stuff and just think, well, I'm doing a great job because look how much I've built. But it's about building for the player experience over over the content you can visually see. And as long as you can describe that and you can explain why you've done the things you've done, that's still level design. Levels are meant to be played, and it's well, what do you want your players to feel, right, when they're playing it? Do you want them to feel, for instance, the 1-1 level in Mario, where it's it's literally the intro to the game. You can even see, although it's potentially a smaller picture, that they add a coin block, just so you know how to jump, and then you jump into a coin block to see what it does, gives you money, brilliant, and then you have a single Goomba. Well, that's not much of a threat, but it's because you've never seen a Goomba before. And then the pipes of different ranges and sizes, and as you go throughout the level, you can kind of see that it starts at the top, and obviously it's one continuous screen in the actual game rather than it being layered. But you can see as it goes, it slowly but surely increases complexity. I think Nintendo is very good at doing this. In Mario Maker, however, when you give community people player tools, well, you want to make something incredibly stressful and something that's very precise, and the reward and challenge of your level is beating it. So that's the appeal of playing it, and you know that there's someone that's going to really stick to try and complete this. It's okay that it's so mind-numbingly hard to get through. And I mean, the nice thing about Mario Maker is the creator had to finish it to be able to publish the level in the first place. So, they were clearly very, very practiced in their own thing. But the reason I'm giving these two varied examples is because just because you're building, again, a platform or a level or whatever else, and something's challenging or frustrating or someone's having a hard time with it, doesn't mean you need to dumb everything down and make it as simple as possible, because I think people mistake simplicity for again, creating a smoother experience overall, but that can lead to a less memorable one. So really quickly, I'm just going to go over kind of what you might have heard a term called white box level design. It's essentially just building things out of cubes. So if you were to reference something, so for example, this castle, let's say in the real world, you have lots of little greebly bits. You've got lots of little details and things. I mean, even this room, right? Like the planters, the screens, the castle example, you've got the battlements, the crenellation, you've got the little bits on the tower that I don't know the name of. You've got the towers, you've got a square tower, a round tower. Well, when you go to build that, it can be quite intimidating to look at the end result and be like, oh my God, there's so much there. But really, you can break it down into its composite shapes. You can have, what is that building, if not some cylinders on the corners, some cube stretched out, a bigger cube that's a bit taller, and then you're basically done. So the first pass of doing this castle would literally be that. It would be the bare minimum possible, because all of this is going to change. You really, really have to get comfortable with the idea of iterating through your work. You're not going to nail it first time by any means at all. And even if you think you've nailed it, you'll play it, and then someone will you'll realize through watching people play it that, oh my God, I have to change so much. Then, if you're starting to feel like, oh, actually, this is quite good, you can start adding those extra tertiary details and things. The reason that you want to build with less pieces initially is because it makes it so, so much easier just to change stuff. If I was to change, like, this image right here, if I haven't, like, folded things properly, if I haven't grouped it properly, you're, like, individually selecting assets. Like, you'd hope it's folded in, like, the Unreal Outliner, for instance, but then maybe it's not right. So it can be... It's all about just being as agile and fast with your workflow as possible until you get like the fun result that you want, and then detail it. But it's not to say that at this stage, when you start detailing things won't change. It just means that you're trying to sketch stuff out, and then you can kind of use color, for instance, to highlight different elements, to highlight doorways. Same with lighting and whatever else. Like, when adding lights to a scene, it's not just about, like, it's not as simple as, well, on every doorway I'll add, like, a light. If you look at kind of like the castle gates, because they're contrasting against the rest of the environment, the darkness is still something that draws your eye, and you're like, oh, cool, well, I wonder what's through there. So there's lots of different ways for you to, like, funnel people through your level, and you can communicate that with the most basic elements. You don't have to have tons of art packs and things like that. So what levels have I worked on? So in 2019 to 2021 is when I joined the industry. I joined Fire Sprite Games in Liverpool. I worked on Star Citizen on a game mode called Theatres of War. It was essentially like a battlefield mode where we were building on the Star Citizen like planet tech, and you had multiple phases, and it was great. I love Battlefield. It was really, really good. And I mean, the project itself was a bit tricky to work on and whatnot, but generally it was really, really good for me to work on, just to learn about just the workflows in the industry and working with other people and things. So I think when you're working as a student, you're kind of expected to do everything, right? Like, you are the artist and the lighting artist and the person optimizing it and making sure it runs properly. And then you're also just trying to decide what gameplay are you doing. And if you're building in base Unreal or any game engine really without like a set of mechanics, you're building the mechanics. You're trying to think of, well, how big is my double jump? How far do I dash? So it's so much to kind of take on board. So when you start in like industry, for instance, or when you get a job in a lot wider studio, a lot of that pressure is actually taken off. I worked on the reworks of Broken Moon and Dying Star, which go back to the aerial combat example I was giving before. We kind of added a lot of like asteroids and things like that to the space, made it much larger. But ultimately, the fun of these maps is that you get to fly around really fast in a spaceship. So adding tons and tons and tons of stuff not only makes it a bit cluttered and hard to orientate yourself, but it just makes the gameplay actively worse. So again, like, think more about what you're designing for rather than just, it would be cool to fly for an asteroid, because it could be cool, but test it. Play it and test it and see. Really, like, throw it against not just you testing it, throw it against other people that have never flown in a ship before. How do they handle it? Throw it against like the best pilots ever. How do they handle it? So then after that, I supported on Horizon Call of the Mountain, so the Horizon VR game. That was a lot of like optimization work near the end of the project. It was just kind of making things run better, essentially. And then, like I said, currently I'm working on Last Sentinel, which is like an open world game. So I'm doing helping with a lot of the world design, getting like in certain sections of the map and building that out. So we're referencing a lot of real places and making sure that we're staying true to the general size. But because the general size is massive and game worlds aren't massive, you have to choose what you chop and trim to get it to be like an actually playable space. So how do I get started? Is that in 2015 I started playing CSGO with my friends. After a few months of learning the game, I found out mapping tools, started making levels for fun, and again found that testing with my friends was a great motivator, because they would have suggestions for what we could change in the map, and I'd do them, and then we'd play them, and like, oh, cool, and some of them wouldn't work, some of them would, but again, that was all just kind of the fun of, it was nice that every time I had a map, it was someone that I could go to them and say, oh, I've made some changes, do you want to play it? And it was really good. the very first map I made, I had so many kind of cool ideas for it, right? I was going to be so ambitious. I'd been playing Battlefield 4 a lot of the time, and I really wanted to capture like the feeling of playing Battlefield, where there's explosions going off all around you. It's very tight corridors. It was going to be this kind of snowy mountain village where you're going up, and there's tons of buildings, and there was even a map in the game called Monastery, which is the map that's on the screen. So I knew that the assets existed in the game for me to like eventually do the art pass. It was really, really good. It's all brilliant. I started working on it in 2015. It took me about 7 months of on and off work, because honestly, I wasn't the most diligent. I think it's perfectly fine, especially when you're doing stuff in your own time, to not kill yourself to make your work. I think you should work really hard, and you should stay dedicated to stuff, and it's so easy to start a project and stop it, and start a project and stop it. So I think these Counter-Strike maps I made, I was really diligent with myself to not just jump off to a new thing. But ultimately, it took quite a while to make, because I was still learning the tool set, I was still figuring out how the engine works. It's obviously very different to like the Unreal interface. I think Source 2 is a much nicer one if you were to get into Counter-Strike 2 level design. But yeah, ultimately it was all about like the design itself. So it took about 28 versions going through CS District, which was my hostage level, and you might realize that the visuals aren't a snowy mountain. They're not the monastery map that I showed you previously. And it's because things change as you're building it. I realized that I wasn't actually good enough to do what was in my head. And I found lots of textures and lots of materials and things that I kind of liked, and all the layout changes didn't fit as much. And the legacy of that snowy mountain is the steepest road you've ever seen, slightly below the frame. If you try and think about how that pieces up in your head, it kind of doesn't. But you could walk up it, and it played fine, and it was okay. The second map, I wanted to take inspiration. I wanted to build off the type of things that I found fun. So it was kind of remembering gameplay elements. So in Time Splitters 2, there was a map called Mexican Mission that had this like kind of square drop-down hole. I always found really fun, because there was a game mode called Virus where you get chased through it, and you'd be able to like run circles around enemies and things. So the next map I made was when I started. So District basically took lots of my college education, and then I started my next map in college pretty much straight after, but it took ages to finish, because I really, really struggled with it. I had this idea that I said about the kind of gap in the floor, but that was kind of it. And then I started my uni degree, and so I backbenched it as well, right? I focused on my uni course stuff and whatever else, and then I would come back to it like over the summer holidays or whatever else, or when I have free time. So the main thing for me, though, was still keeping the elements that I found fun. I was so determined to make this drop-down section work. And I think ultimately the end result has some interesting gameplay. But looking back on my process, it was trying to cram a square peg into a round hole, and it was more that I just turned the box, that round hole slowly got ground down into a square hole after a year and 4 months of my life of like just losing my mind. So sometimes there are ideas you'll think will be brilliant, and it was fun, but it just won't work out in the bigger picture. And you kind of have to be okay with like just taking a step back and being like, okay, I can shelve that. It might work better for something else at a different time, but it's clearly not working well like right now. So Tomb took 38 versions. It was the first time I'd actually tried to like detail something and tried to base it in like an actual location. District was just kind of throwing a bunch of textures on. This I wanted it to feel at least a bit more like Egyptian maybe, or whatever else, and Counter-Strike's full of textures like that. It gave me an opportunity to make a cafe, a themed cafe for my map. It's called the Sarcophagus. I mean, you're not laughing, so you don't get the joke. What it is it's coffee in the middle of sarcophagus. So, that's okay. Next time. So the third map I did was the final one. It was actually what I did for my final year project. So I'd worked on my Counter-Strike maps in my own time as like my own personal work. And then I'd done uni work in between that helped teach me Unreal. It helped kind of basically get me to grips with lighting and meshing stuff out, and it was very much using each module that I was doing to just focus on one element that I knew I was a bit crap at, basically. So the third map I did for my FYP, I wanted to pull from the real world. I wanted to make a map set in the UK. I was quite interested just by how canals and bridges work, and thought that would be a fun gameplay section to have like cross over each other essentially. So I'm just going to go to a quick video now of the work in progress of that. So hopefully you can see from that, can you tap back to the thing, please? Thank you. Hopefully you can see from that, it went through so many changes, and a lot of those different slides, it was basically saving like, version 1, when I decided that I was kind of happy with that, I'd save it as version 2. So then you could go back and look at the iterations. There were so many instances of a truck shifting like 5 units to the left and 5 units to the right, or up or down or to the side. I think the point I want to make with, oh, it went back. There you go. The point I want to make with this is still focusing on finding what you find fun. Like, discover, like for me it was Counter-Strike, and I think honestly, doing level design in particular with a set of mechanics that exist, not like pulling as much strain away from yourself from, again, deciding player movement and enemy AI and all this type of stuff, like trying to find a level builder that hopefully exists. But honestly, if you're, there's first-person shooter level builders, there's, I think Doom Eternal has some scripting tools. Again, Counter-Strike 2 has some really good stuff, but it's pretty tricky to find dedicated tooling. But what you have to remember is that you're showcasing your level design. You're showcasing like, well, what am I, how am I moving through the map? What kind of things are the player going to, what they're going to experience? So when I was a student, there was some advice that I got that really kind of rocked me to my core, in the sense that it made me feel absolutely crap about myself, because it was basically saying, when you apply to the industry, you need to have the level of quality that you see in the industry. And I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do that? Like, even like Quaint, my like best work, it looks a bit naff, honestly. Like, it's the Counter-Strike map. It's not lit brilliantly. The prop placement could be better, whatever else. But what I think I didn't realize is that that's not true at all. If you're applying to be a level designer, they care about what you're designing. They care about why you're designing it. They care about you as an individual and what you find interesting. Obviously, for me, it was Counter-Strike. In my interview, I was really scared. They told me to dress smart but casual. I was like, oh my God, what does that mean? I got chinos and a buttoned-up shirt, and I was like sweating like crazily, and I spent the last of my money on a taxi. I was like, ah! And then I got there, and it was just a conversation, and they were just, oh, tell us about your Counter-Strike map. I was like, oh, thank God. I could talk about Counter-Strike for ages. That's easy. So as long as you actually like and care about the work you're doing and you find it interesting, it's an absolute breeze, really is. So the key takeaways that I want you to try and get from this is that make what you find fun. Don't make don't remake Doom, the first level of Doom, because someone tells you to. Don't look at a speed level design video of someone spamming together environment art in 2 weeks and feeling like, oh, that's level design. Don't assume that because you've built something the first time that it's going to stay like that. But also don't let you failing at making something, or not failing at making something, but you making something that's a bit naff, put you off starting altogether, because making literally anything is better than kind of having that paralysis, the white canvas kind of feeling of an empty piece of paper. Pull from things that you enjoy. Why do you like the things you like? Kind of analyze it. Look at, well, what's your favorite game? What was the best sequence from that? Why is it the best sequence? What makes it so good? And then test often. If you can, really, it can be really, really easy to kind of squirrel away for like 6 months and craft the best thing ever, and it's all brilliant, and you play it, and it's amazing. And the moment you put it in front of someone else, within the first 30 seconds, you realize, like, oh my God, I didn't clip that wall, and now they're spending, ages like breaking a bunch of stuff. And the further along into a project you get, the more you'll have to edit, right? Like if you test at this chunk and it's all fairly basic stuff, you can mold and mix and change, and it's not attached to anything else. And especially in something like Counter-Strike, where it's like a multiplayer layout, where it's all kind of interconnected, as soon as you finish that final overall image, if one thing changes, it affects everything around it, and it becomes so hard to pull those strings, and it honestly just comes with experience, really. Personally, I don't think the engine matters. You might see that, you're required tons of years in Unreal or Unity or whatever else. My first job working on Star Citizen used CryEngine. Never touched CryEngine in my life. Counter-Strike the maps I made were in Hammer, which is like a super old engine, closer to the type of engine they'd used for the original COD. It didn't matter, because I could talk to them about why I designed the things I designed. I could show them that I had used Unreal, at least, which is vaguely similar to CryEngine. And then that was fine, and they needed a first-person shooter multiplayer designer. So honestly, I got quite lucky. But yeah, so thank you for being talked at, everyone. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, cool. Oh, really? Well, I don't know, I guess I'll walk away. All right.